Hello there, a very good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to the Citizens Chat Show here on Civic Space TV, streaming on YouTube. My name is Judith Atim, and it is a pleasure to have you once again. Today we are taking stock of Uganda's 62 years of independence, marked on the 9th of October, that is Wednesday this week. And we shall be looking further deeply into the President's address and trying to make sense of how far we've come and how much further we have to go as a country. Let me take this opportunity to welcome my guests or my panelists. From my immediate left is Dr. Robert Ojambo, who is head of the History Department at Kyambogo University. Dr. Robert, good afternoon and welcome.
Glad to be here and glad to see full house again.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed, we are a full house today. Next to Robert, of course, is Dr. Sarah Bireete, the Executive Director of the Center for Constitutional Governance. Dr. Sarah, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, viewers, and it's glad to be back on the show.
Thank you very much. Mr. Joseph Othieno, political commentator and UPC ideologue. Good afternoon, Joseph.
Good afternoon. It could be better, but I was in Toronto yesterday or the other day on that Independence Day, and I saw a trail that looks like a convoy of Mr. Museveni coming to Bukele to abuse it. But we welcome it.
Well, we shall be hearing that your perspectives, of course, on the president's visit that side for the Independence Day. Last but not least is retired Major Awich Pollar, Director for External Relations at the National Resistance Movement. That's a ruling party. Major, good afternoon.
Thank you. As usual, happy to be here, and I bring greetings from NRM, the Mass Party, and the Mighty Party.
We do receive the greetings, definitely. Thank you very much. So I want to just read a little bit about from the president's speech as he was celebrating, his speech at the Independence Day. And just four things, I want to zero in on four things. When he was talking about how they distilled the ideological principle of the NRM. First, of course, he talked about patriotism, the love for Uganda. Why is it important for Ugandans to love their country? Well, because we need it for our prosperity. That's what he said. Then the second ideological principle, of course, is that of Pan-Africanism. Again, similar reasons. Thirdly, socioeconomic transformation. And the last or the fourth ideological principle that the party distilled was democracy. And in his words, this was done so that the people are able to hold their leaders accountable for their actions or inactions. I think I would like us to start with, of course, the fourth ideological principle and how far you think the ruling party has actually lived true to this. Can I start with you, Robert?
Yeah, thank you. I don't want you to limit us to the ruling party, because the ruling party is just second half of Uganda's life. Maybe let's first go to independence. What was the purpose for independence? And why did the Africans, all over Africa and other places, struggle to get independence? I think by nature people just want to be free from any hindrances. So that was the first thing. People do not want to be subjugated. Even animals, if you go to Entebbe Zoo, animals are looked after at the zoo, they are given water, they are given food, they are given everything. But if a wire mesh breaks somewhere, they escape from that zoo and they want to go to the wilderness where there is nothing of that kind. Now, the independence of Uganda, like any other countries in Africa, of course there are countries which really fought for their independence. And there was guerrilla war and fighting with the colonialists. Uganda, not so much. We fought mainly on paper. But in 1962, we get our independence after that Lancaster Conference, which had been taking place in England for a very long time. Unfortunately, that conference did not solve all the problems that we had. What were the problems then? There was a problem of Buganda. There was a problem of who would become the leader. There was a problem of the country Uganda, because there was kingdoms which had been there, and many other issues. So they sought out all the problems, and the two problems were left pending to be resolved after independence. And these two problems were the problem of the lost counties, Buyaga, Bugangaizi, and those others in Bunyoro. And two, the problem of leadership, who would be the leader of Uganda. I keep quoting this statement. I was reading the Uganda Argus. So Okot Bitek then was in the UK doing one of his degrees, and he was met by a journalist, and he was requested to speak about how the conference was going. And he gave a very good analogy, being Okot Bitek. He said the constitutional making process was being handled like somebody carrying a sack of eggs. You put eggs in a sack and you are carrying them, if you can imagine. And therefore, people had to be very careful. And what were the issues that people were very careful about? The issue of Buganda, the issue of the lost counties, and then who would become a leader. And they asked him, what do you project independence to be? He said, the sack will reach somewhere and it will break. And Okot Bitek, that's why you see, sometimes I hear on TV people saying that he's studying literature and these other things are not important. But this man was using the imagination of literature that he was good at, and saying that the independence, yes, the process is going on, but it will not last. And indeed, of course, the other issues were settled. Those two issues, they said one would be handled after 2 years, and that was the issue of Bugangaiza and Buyaga. Then there was the issue of the leadership, which was handled in November of the following year, 1963, when UPC choreographed with a few people, and the formation of KY Alliance led to Sir Edward Mutesa becoming the president of Uganda in 1963. Now, that was one of the enigma of independence. Then the issue of Bugangaizi, of course, that is what later causes the 1966 crisis. So when we got independence, people were happy, and they saw that sovereignty has been defined for the first time. There is a country called Uganda, owned by Ugandans, and Ugandans were very happy. If you watch TV, you really see Ugandans were very happy and hopeful. They knew that now their problems are going to be solved by their own people. But now these two issues have haunted Uganda up to today. The issue of Buyaga and Bugangaizi, and the issue of the presidency. The presidency, of course, there are people who are not happy with it, but they did not have anything to do. They just left it the way it was. And that issue later causes the problem between the prime minister and the executive prime minister and the president in 1966 crisis. But that is also really created by how they handled the issue of 1964 lost county vote. Of course, that leads us to 1966. So the best time, in my view, in my readings of Uganda's independence, was from 1962 to 1964, up to 6. And you need to check the GDP of the country at that time, compared to how many people we had. Look at the value of the Uganda shilling. Look at the export value. Look at everything. It is the foundation on every good thing that you see in Uganda was set. In 1966, this is destabilized because of the background that I gave you. And later it leads to 1971 with the coming of Idi Amin, and then their independence is almost lost. Then 1986, which in my view created another, for us in history, we don't just take things for granted. We think this is a form of imperialism. What we would call sub-imperialism, where Africans now take over each other. And for that matter, as we speak today, there are very many people who doubt whether we have independence. Remember, we had a liberation war in 1979. There are people I have heard from many commentators arguing that indeed you need another liberation. And why do people now need say they need a liberation? They feel they are not in charge of matters that pertain them in their life. But somebody will argue, you have MPs, you have LC5, you have all these nomenclatures of leadership from LC1 to the president. Why don't you go through that and you speak? Are they important? Is LC still important? If LC was important, there would be elections every time their term ends. But now they go on, and so many other things. So in brief, now to answer your question, where you are taking us to the principles of of NRM, the four. In fact, when you look at them, those were the issues why people wanted independence. They wanted to look patriots, they wanted to be Pan-Africans, they wanted social economic development, and they wanted democracy. Now, when you look at each one of them, Ugandans are very patriotic people. And many Ugandans love their country with all the problems. I've never heard anybody who has declared that he doesn't want to be a Ugandan. There are many Ugandans who love themselves, and they do so unconditionally. But the issue of Pan-Africanism, I think people have not yet understood this Pan-Africanist thing. That one, but Ugandans still love other people in Africa. You see it from when, for example, there is World Cup. They all support Cameroon, Nigeria, others, and so on. And why are they supporting them? Some of them do not even know the direction of Cameroon, but they are fellow Africans and many other things. And when there is a problem in Sudan or in Congo, Ugandans feel pity for them. Democracy, just quickly, democracy, I think it is a stillbirth. In most African countries, democracy is still a stillbirth. I have always said that people value, or the leadership only relate democracy to periodic elections. No, that is not enough for democracy. Democracy includes freedom, people to say something, what they want to do, to determine what how they want to be. And it takes welfare. Even welfare sometimes is part of democracy, to determine how I live my life. So in Uganda here, if you asked many people and you carried out a survey that have we achieved the democracy that we wanted at independence, it is a tall order. Because in Uganda, people only organize elections to win them at all levels, and that cannot be democracy.
I'm going. Thank you very much, Robert. We've had you giving us this whole historical background, taking us way back 62 years ago, and taking us through the times and the political upheavals that have also shaped the country over the years. Let me hear from you now, Dr. Sarah. If you could also just give me your general perception or reading of the event itself, and also generally how far we've come over the years.
Well, the 62 years of Uganda's independence, if Uganda was a person, would be 2 years in retirement after the 60 years.
Senior citizen.
So that's beyond maturity. But if you check our level of development, the pace we had at independence, the takeoff pace we had after assuming self-rule, and the disruption of military coups, and the role that the military has played, either as rebels or as officers, in distorting our democracy and reversing our progress as a country. So you have the disruption from 1966, 67, and the disruption 1971 through the Amin coup. Then the generation we had over Idi Amin, the expulsion of Asians, the sanctions, the economic struggles, although some people say the economy was put in the hands of Ugandans, but I don't know whether there was progress to that extent. And then you have the 1980 elections, then the NRA Bush War that disrupted that tenure of 1980 to 85, and the human rights violations, the coups, 85, I think 3 coups happened. You had Basilio Okero, who was president for 6 hours. Many Ugandans might not even know. Then you have Rutwa, and then the NRA when they assumed power. Under legal notes number 1 that the NRA issued, the preamble of legal notes number 1 states that us as NRA have captured the government and the state, and the state power will be exercised through the National Resistance Council. That's the first paragraph of legal notes number 1. And I don't know whether we have moved from that NRA capture of the state and the government. We seem to be grappling with that capture. And I will substantiate what I mean as I analyze the constitutional journey. Because legal notes number 1 acted more or less as the constitution. And in the other paragraphs, it shows, it goes ahead to suspend clauses of the constitution. And we had the 10 years of everybody being conscripted into the NRM before the constitution, NRI, NRM, and the Constituent Making Assembly. The Constituent Making Assembly had the 2 positives. One positive was that there was a national conversation and a national consensus on how Ugandans wished to be governed. The second positive is that there was bottom-up approach. This process of generating consensus was bottom-up consultations. I was young when NRM came to power. I was in primary 4. But I followed through this process of making the constitution on radio, coming from a politically aware family. So we were able to follow and know the issues at stake, followed through the CA elections. Everybody was active because they had been involved in the consultations. Who is qualified to make the constitution? And I'm referring to that exercise, particularly that in modern era, the best quality of legislators we had were the Constituent Assembly delegates. We have not had that quality again. We got our best brains into the Constituent Assembly to enact the Constitution because everybody was aware of what role and what capacities were required. Even when NRM tried to campaign multipartyism, the likes of Dr. Robert could not be stopped. Tuberondwa contested with Mushega, but people said no.
We want Tuberondwa.
Yes, because everybody knew the required expertise. And up to today, that is the required expertise for parliament. But because people are not engaged, so people disengaged from that popular participation in Constituent Assembly, and they don't know that we need the same capabilities in government today to implement the Constitution that was enacted by our best brains. So they are sending the opposite of the Constituent Assembly delegates. Because of commercialization of politics, because of vulgarization of our politics, it is the people, the survival of the fittest, either through manner and violence, because those are the determinants of our electioneering. So in that submission, I have analyzed the degeneration of electoral or elected leadership in this country. People do not know that we still need our best brains to go into legislation, to go into keeping Parliament in check, to go into demanding transparency and accountability, to the extent that today, in a report released by the IGG last week, the country loses 25 billion per day to corruption because Parliament has no capacity to do the checks and balances that they are supposed to do to the excesses of the executive. When you go away from the legislative assembly, let's look at the social protection services for the citizens. Under colonial administration, people were able to access functional hospitals, quality schools. All secondary schools were almost the same grade, and it did not matter where you have studied from. That's why people were studying anywhere in the country to promote nationalism. Whether you were in Intare, Weranyanji, Mwiri, Tororo Boys, or Soroti, Guru, I don't know the names, Teso College, they were the same standard. And people acquired the same quality of education under colonialism and Obote one. Come the days after that, we have quality education as a preserve of the rich, as compared to quality education being accessed by the ordinary citizens. So when you have this kind of saying good services are accessed by the rich, you are already creating a society of two worlds. So disparities, instead of education being an equalizer in society, it is a discriminating aspect or arena. The rich can take their children to good schools, either government or private. The poor are dropping out at primary level. Even when we have UPE and USE, we have a dropout rate. 1 million pupils get lost from P1 to P7. Secondary school, 50% to completion of O level. A level, I think 30% are the ones finishing A level, and at Makerere we have about 20% at university level.
Tertiary institutions,
So
yes.
from UPE, when you are tracking to higher education, you have about 30% completing higher education from UPE entrance
It is less.
or less,
It's less than even 10.
or completing.
Yes.
Yes. So, and nobody is accounting to the missing Ugandans in the education system. This was never the case. Under in pre-colonial, in colonial administration and immediate post-independence, this was never the case. So when you come to access to healthcare, healthcare is for the rich. Although the census report is also showing that the rich are dying younger compared to the poor because of lifestyle.
The report is faulty.
Okay.
In so many ways,
I know the report is a crisis report really, but we will pick a few of the issues that we can, because this is national data. And it's very unfortunate that in this digital era, you have a head of UBOS, speaking carelessly after missing the most important exercise of the country that governs planning, that is a reference for everybody dealing on matters Uganda, and we do not have a census report to speak of. But ideally, we have an indicator that the richer are dying earlier than the poor because of lifestyle diseases. And anyway, that has been the concern of World Health Organization, and it's not just Uganda. But the access to health by poor people is like a miracle. Helping somebody to go to hospital or even to see a professional doctor for consultation other than self-medication is also like a miracle. Instead of being a basic service. When you go away from that and we go to the economic side, we still have 70% of Ugandans caught up in agriculture. But on the other hand, you have these 70% Ugandans contributing 24.5% of GDP. And then that also shows you the economic disparities. How can 70% of the population contribute 24% of GDP? Also, on top of being so much absorbed in agriculture, the same unfortunately, I will keep referring to the census
The
because it's
actually,
national data.
in relation to what you're saying, also what the president also made reference to the data, and this is now the contradiction. That finally, 67% of our people are in the money economy.
I will come to that because I was grabbing a different point. So we have 70% of Ugandans being occupied in the agriculture sector, but the same preliminary, let me call them preliminary census reports because of the controversy. So the same preliminary census reports indicate that 18.4 million are food insecure. So what is the 70 doing in agriculture? And the food insecure Ugandans are the poor.
Yeah.
And the poor are the majority involved in subsistence or rudimentary agriculture. So that even shows you that as much as we have a population stuck in primordial agricultural methods, they are also unable to feed themselves. That draws us to climate change issues, draws us to land fragmentation and land ownership challenges, and the people, the problems that poor people are grappling with in this country, including land grabbing that makes people homeless every other day, especially the vulnerable societies. When you go to the political, how have we fared politically? I have mentioned already the political turbulence. We can add in civil wars, of course, which led to coups. We can now look at the constitutional journey as I conclude. We are on the 4th generation of Uganda's constitution, the 1994 constitution, that has been amended several times, sometimes for progress, sometimes for regress. We don't have an orderly mechanism for political transition in this country. It is important to note that for the 62 years, the only leaders that have accessed power with the mandate of the people is the 1 year of Ben Chwanuka, the Obote 1, Obote 2. They have come to power through the ballot and the popular mandate of the people. The other leaders have captured power through the coup or Bireete democracy, including NRM. That's how they came to power. So, and in terms of handover of power, peaceful handover of power, as much as Dr. Robert accessed power democratically, he never left democratically for the 2 terms. He was overthrown. The people that have left power democratically is the trio presidents of Nyamchoncho and others. And maybe when Benaisa was removed after 62 days. Yeah, and Ulule. They were removed and they surrendered the instruments of power. The rest of the people have left through Bireete democracy. So today, the 1995 constitution has no mechanism for peaceful handover of power after removal of term limits and age limits. There is a fraudulent argument that we go for elections every 5 years. Why am I calling it fraudulent? Fraudulent because the nature of the elections we hold in this country fall below the minimum standard required in the constitution of credible, free and fair regular elections. It only meets the one component of regular, does not meet the credibility test, does not meet the freeness and fairness test. And this is supported by court judgments. Elections in this country are like war. We have bullets flying over citizens' heads. We have unaccounted for killings of the 2020 elections. We have still 28 missing persons unaccounted for because of abductions during elections. And we have about 35 young people facing kangaroo trial in military courts for supporting opposition. So the nature of our politics today is that supporting opposition is the biggest crime you can commit in this country, and it exposes you to all manner of risks that can even warrant or generate kidnaps, torture, and extrajudicial killings. That is the state of democracy in this country.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your views, Sarah. Joseph, I know you're definitely going to give us a comparison between the way things were under Obote, the founding father of the UPC party, and what we are seeing today. Your thoughts, please.
That's a bit unfair on me. I am the nearest to the independence child, and so therefore I want to record that I started primary education under Idi Amin for information. I'll credit the foundations to UPC, of course, and that I completed my primary living exams, PLE, under Idi Amin, and I did excellently under Idi Amin. So that is part of the contextual narrative around our independence, that notwithstanding everything else that happened, that whatever I went through under Idi Amin, I have not seen any of it, under this regime, and so that's how bad it is. But I also say that, look, yesterday I was in the other day, the Independence Day found me in Nagongera, not to celebrate, but to deal with some family emergencies. And as I was about to leave, my cousin's wife came rushingly to talk to my daughter, to talk of how badly off my cousin was, and he was in a health clinic and had been moved from Nagongera dispensary to a health private clinic downtown. And my daughter's initial reaction was, why to downtown rather than Tororo? And said, well, yeah, why rather than Tororo, the main hospital? And her response was, and I was completely embroiled with my guest, that no, because there's no money. That is on Independence Day. Later, I found myself in town, and as I was seated, ironically, with a fantastic young lady from Ankole, about 6:30, we saw this very long convoy that I was joking about on their way coming from Busia, but I think possibly going to Mbale, meaning that if people were going to be sleeping in Mbale from Busia, the facilities in Busia and Tororo are incapable generally of accommodating all of them. But I was looking at Milton Obote's speech, independence speech of 1965. Considering what Dr. Ojambo said and Sarah, and this is an introductory element, I'll not go into much of that, possibly I'll disappoint you. But very quickly, the guy paints a picture of genuine, true, massively impressive independence. And I ask all Ugandans and all people interested in Uganda to read the speech. One, the context of context of the founding of our independence. That our independence parents had in the 40s, particularly, and early part of the 50s, that saw the founding of the Uganda National Congress et al. That these guys recognized us as African citizens in this country, a country then controlled by the British politically and to an extent economically, and massively controlled by the Asians, nearly 90% of the time, and that the rest of the African citizens were not party to the day-to-day livelihoods of the economy of Uganda. And so these guys sought to seek for independence, economic independence, political independence, social independence, and independence in every aspect. Obote talks about, and I think Sarah talked about it, the fact that in 1962, the number of Africans, you Ugandans, controlling retail trade in this country was at 12%. That's why I pushed the 90, which must be Asian. And by 12%. And by 1965, as a deliberate government policy, in those 3 years, it had gone to 35. And that the admissions to A level, senior 6 and senior 5, had more than quadrupled, 5 times. That university enrollment had trebled. And that the number of farmers' cooperatives, look through the details, had moved from Africans in the cooperative movement, apparently also were already on there. I think they were at about 20% or thereabout, but it shot to 65%. The number of cotton ginneries, this is 1965, small population, that existed at independence, where I think 21 or 41, something like that, it had risen by 65%. Ginneries, meaning these are factories, because we talk about manufacturing, all this kind of stuff. And I can go on and on and on. And interestingly, I did not see the emphasis on health, because the Foundation for Health, as Sarah said, was generally there. But of course, that's when we massively built hospitals. But in that specific speech, it talks about education, amongst as a very specific emphasis. Why? Because you want to pick up this new nation and invest in them, because education is the #1 equalizer. And so he talks about education, he talks about agriculture, and he talks about livestock, and goes into the details in the speech, because I don't want to bore us, and talks about the amount of money that government was enabling farmers with, including giving them subsidy, including subsidies to bring in exotic cattle, some of which the Musevenis these days boast with, some of them are stolen from public farms. You know, and you look at this and say, look, this is independence, and this is a nation state going on. And then the man says that, look, part of what our independence was all about was to ensure that the demand and destinies of our people are translated into the reality fast, fastly, equitably, and equitably, justifiably, and quickly. Use that word, quickly, you know, at the time. And so you could see this is a government that was in a hurry to emancipate the African population, emancipate the citizens, and to deliver. And he said somewhere that at no time should people think, and I noticed what was coming towards the 1966, that the independence was earned not for the privilege of Owechitibwa or Bwana, but for the common man and et al. And it goes through that. And so you see this, and then said, on this, we are delivering this, and we've delivered that. And then he talks about foreign interest also in a very much nuanced way, meaning that we had fully attained an independence. And fast forward from then on, notwithstanding the 1966-67 interruptions, you know, up to 1971, no major aspect of our economy or economic development and growth, and some of the key indices that Sarah was talking about, were interrupted with. You know, none of them were interrupted with until 1970. Then come into Idi Amin's time, notwithstanding everything else, and I was involved in some rehabilitation of Amin movie the other day, and it's a different conversation. And you look through these things, then you see why Amin came in. Amin came in, and we're discussing this again, maybe a bit more. Amin did not seek to overthrow the government. Amin was to be arrested over the alleged killing of Brigadier Koya and his involvement in Congo. And foreign forces use Amin to overthrow Mbote in order to save his neck, number one. So number two, side by side with that, you see Amin, the man who's there to save his back. But with all his blindness and illiteracy, the country sort of remained. And one of the scholars, Yoga Dola, persuaded me 20 years ago to start seeing Amin in a different light and said, look, many of Amin's excesses, other than targeting particularly the Langa, Choli, and all the Lu communities first, and then all other people that he thought were UPCs and supporters of Obote immediately, which was generally sort of wrong. Amin's subsequent killings and excesses were because, one, he came from a minority community, he had inferiority complex, he was fighting for self-defense, basically. And so he was doing it in such a rudimentary way, and if you look at this at 50 years ago, some of this could be just, you could see where it's going from. I'm not justifying it. But then fast forward, the people who lived through Idi Amin, you know, people who studied in Dar es Salaam, you know, where socialism was big, you know, people who worked in Obote's office in 1970 at the peak of massive economic, you know, revolution taking place in this country, you know, and people who then went ahead and fought, grantedly, you know, against Idi Amin. We come and you get power, and you abuse the Republic of Uganda in a manner in which you're doing it today. My book, as I said the other day, and I was telling people in Toro on Wednesday, we had nothing to celebrate. In 1970s figures for education, the primary living exams, Sarah, you know, Bukeedi was the best, followed incidentally in terms of grade 1, followed apparently by Karamoja. Of course, it was statistical, based on how many grade 1s went. Followed by Karamoja, and I think followed by Teso. The highest number of entrants were Busoga. And you go through this, and now Bukeedi has the highest level of unemployment as of this week's. I think it was the figures. I think one of the national publications did that. But then the multi-dimensional poverty index puts it highest. But I'm sticking to Bukeedi, but simply saying, so what is it? What changed between 1970 and today? Now, that you can talk about Bukeedi, that you can talk about the rest of the country. But what has happened, of course, more recently, I think what Sarah was talking about earlier, was this thing about these guys come and in the name of whatever they did, they privatized education, they privatized healthcare, they privatized agriculture, they privatized every aspect of our economy. And the worst shocking thing is the other day, I see a video doing the rounds by Sudhir, who suggests that the Ugandan Asian population at 0.01%, some people have argued, I think 0.5%, controls 60% of Uganda's economy. Now, if that were true, that is extraordinary. Why did we attain our independence? Now, I've seen on Twitter handles, including one from a good friend of mine who's both a lawyer and a journalist, and someone else went ahead and commented that, well, these guys, give them the economy, then they'll control everything else, arguing almost in an undertone that possibly you cannot find a committed Ugandan patriotic Asian. Possibly not true, because I have said on this program again and again and again, one of the few Ugandan citizens I am proud to have associated with is Shafika Rain, a Ugandan Asian who was our last High Commissioner to London up to 1985. A Ugandan nationalist who says he joined UPC in 1958, and from there they participated and contributed to the liberation struggles. And he was also part of those people who were drafters of the Departed Asians Custodian Board arrangements. But really, from a nationalist perspective, and someone who told me also about how some of his fellow Asians, I'll not go into some of the details, are people who are driven by money. But my point is our economy independent? Why did we fight for independence? Do we have leaders who really think nationalistic about this country? And finally, the question of the Pan-Africanism that Dr. Ojambo was talking about. Pan-Africanism is not about simplistically an African identity because of gone and hugged a young lady from the Gambia, so therefore a young lady from Ghana, or we are doing business with a friend from Namibia. No, it's a conscious ideological thing, and I wonder, seeing NRA guys who talk ideology and who talk intellectualism, that no, it's very much about the African personality, it's very much about the African identity in a holistic way, which is basically, so Pan-Africanism is beyond the borders of this continent. And that's why I should also talk about our peoples in Brazil, our people in America, and everywhere else. But it's about the emancipation of our people, but first of all, also being about African identity. So if you have that conscience and driven by that conscience, then you think Mbeki, then you think Haiti. Then you look at our independence then. So really, it must be Africa first, like we told, the NUSU slogan, National Students Union slogan of the 80s, Uganda first. So it must be Africa first, and African personality first. But it's not racist. The fact that we suffered slavery, the fact that we suffered colonialism, the fact that we have had new colonial exploitation, and considering that as a continent we continue to remain the richest, and yet we continue to serve as serfs, including on our country, and to the extent that today, as I said, the other day I was traveling from Nigeria, and I still have to get stuck on a road because they're rolling out merely Maram, on a road that I've done several other times. And you look the other hand, you see without prejudice, a Chinese guy. And I say, where are our engineers? Where are our engineers? And where's our independence? So looking then to where we are today, and as I said, emphasizing the fact that Bukeedi could lead in primary living exams at the time. And now it is not Busoga. Now it possibly will not even be Ankole, because Ankole gets very good figures, for different reasons. But it will be urban schools that may or may not necessarily include some of those that we find in Barra. Meaning education has been thoroughly and completely privatized. And when I was leaving, again, checking on my cousin, the other day, as I said, on Independence Day, the clinic was opposite Mahanga Primary School, a school which in the year started primary 72, had the best pupil in the whole country from primary leaving exams. That is now a clear impossibility. Those are really the issues around an independence. And whenever we talk about these things, if you see what Mr. Museveni and his team were saying the other day in Busia, they're singing slogans. I just don't even think that many of these guys understand what independence is all about. It's just not about getting a group of us going to power. And even if we go to power democratically, and even if we actually respected the rule of law, and even if we actually did reasonably well to our citizens, no. Independence is very much about chasing and pushing for our destiny. It's also about consciously looking at in the new world in which today, that we must competitively think jealously that, look, Ugandans are also human beings and they can also be as good as Mexicans. And we want to achieve what they've got, what they've achieved and better. And considering that Uganda as Africa, as I said, we're the hotbed of our national resources, there's no reason why we should actually not be leading this world in actually a post-Brexit world, and particularly a post-conversations around climate change, which is a big threat. The other day, I passed via Mukwano on early week of the Monday, and the Mukwano road that had just been done, flooded, and we couldn't cross it, and that was on Sunday. And I looked and I took pictures, and in fact, I didn't post it on social media. I said, look, this road was just done the other day. So where are we, and who's taking responsibility? That is, if it's called independence, then it questions the African identity, almost the manner in which Trump mocks our people in America. I'm afraid it's not at all.
Thank you. Major, let's hear from you. Let's hear your thoughts. If you could also, just like the others have, take us through your perceptions or your thoughts about how much we've evolved as a country over the decades, and how you think the NRM party to which you subscribe has performed, looking at all these ideological principles that the president outlined.
Will I have enough time?
Yes.
My colleagues?
You will have. If we don't, we shall always come back and pick it up from there. But for now, the mic is yours.
Okay. You're talking about independence. And I also take recognition of the fact that of the 62 years, NRM has taken 38. So therefore, we're in the center of it, of failures or achievements. Because we take the 38 years out of the 62, maybe 24 years are shared between Congress, 2 terms, and then the others. Now, when we talk about this, I really want us and the viewers to get the feel like we are eating the topic. We get the sweetness like we are eating it about this independence, because we seem to dive in independence and we don't even get a fair view about, had we lost it? We are getting independence from who? And what was it before? So we just dive in there and we make it really contemporary politics. Now, archaeologists who study past, sometimes they dig and they get things, implements that were used by the past people in production and other things. These are some of the things you learn from past events. But also one of the things you learn is sayings, the words, sentences that go about. Now, if you want to value our independence and you want to check how dark non-independence was or colonialism was, there are several sayings found in many communities. Like in Ilangi, for example, there are sayings like, they use it in terms of language, but it is used to mean Africans, that lambera lek. Like is simply the pounding mortar you use for pounding. So colonialists believe that to handle Africans, you need pounding mortar, you need to beat it. And this was seen in public works. Now that the contemporary, you employ people in public works and pay them, okay? You get roads and compensate. True, by that time the land ownership was not that. You could get public road without compensation. But the work there was, people lost lives. So you can get colonialism by such sayings like an African was only best suited with a pounding mortar. That shows you the dark clouds hanging. You can also find it in songs. There are terrible songs in Ilangi which would depict colonialism. You'd see a dark cloud hanging over people. There's one which says that ikarame mun bini logo ineno malbor penche kangwai pe, that you'd see heaven is far but hell was near and there was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to run. And this was basically a depicting of situations in colonialism. It is found in sayings, it is found in songs. Moreover, this one had not even known the idea of economic exploitation. That in Kilembe, copper was being taken to Europe. That coffee that we had forced African to produce was being taken to Europe. That the cotton that they had been beaten with that pounding stick to produce was being taken. But the expression in songs, in sayings, that depicted such a dark cloud was only in the social management of the affairs to execute the colonial rule. To execute the colonial rule. And part of the initiators of the execution were done by fellow Africans, like this guy who passed through Mbale, Semei Kakungulu. Yes. So it was so dark. So I like to bring up views to consider, now that we're talking of independence, what was no independence? What was the opposite? It had dark clouds, there was total exploitation, you had no political decision, and that is it. So I thought I would bring it up. I also thought that we would also understand a few forces that led to this, so that we appreciate them. First and foremost, our grandfathers who went to Second World War. My father was one of them. He fought in Burma. Now, these people were fighting King's African Rifle, what is called KAR. Now, they had infantry units which were combined with whites. And they also saw the whites dying in the front line. They also saw whites were cowards. So when they came back, they said, but so the war itself acted like education, although not informally in a class. So this lot came and really fought for our independence. We deserve to mention and appreciate them. But also there are two external forces that after Bolshevik revolution in Soviet Union, where the workers took over power, they built socialism. Now, in 1917, around 1922 when Egypt got independence, 56 when Sudan got independence, and the 60s when other African countries were getting independence, the fight between capitalism and socialism was so high that it was called Cold War. They were building military equipment, this side was building, they were trying to have spheres of influence. But of interest here is both forces conquered for the independence of Africans. And it is good to notice because it later on manifest. How do you find Kato and Waswa, who are arch enemies, and this Kato and Waswa come to support Sarah? You say, why? Kato, Waswa, who are killing each other, but when it comes to Sarah, they are very happy. Why? The point here was that the American new economy which had come up wanted to cut off Europe, France, UK, and the rest. So America was also interested in our resources. The Soviet Union, of course, knew that the workers wanted to cut off capitalism. France, UK, and the rest were colonial masters. They did it. So this is where Kato and Waswa, who were enemies, are now conspiring to support one Sarah. Now, this now manifests later in the current status, which I will mention, because it now plays a factor in undermining what we would call independence now. So, that is where we came from. I have tried to show the darkness of colonialism, the devil that went with it. And of course, remember this colonialism had come amidst a situation where we had just had slavery, where the blacks were taken to America and a white man would sit in a bar in Atlanta or in New York and say, I have 800 slaves, and out of the 800, 5 today delivered. 3 delivered baby boys and 2 girls. And he's very comfortable about how his slaves are produced. And it's okay. And even there are some slaves who were meant to just go on sleeping with women to produce stronger slaves. This was how bad. Add it on colonialism. So here we are. I'm saying this, if we look at how dark it was, we may be able to appreciate where we are and handle the challenges. Therefore, after we got independence, the cry was self-rule, 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 including the youth who were demonstrating on the streets of Kampala.
Freedom.
Freedom now, self-rule. And again, there was one Kato that had given allusion to. In New York, in General Assembly, they were co-sponsoring resolutions in General Assembly. Self-determination for the colonized. Self-determination for the colonized. There are several resolutions which were co-sponsored by Soviet Union, which was communist, and America, which was capitalist, who were arch rivals in my example of Waswa and Kato. Now, this co-sponsored resolution of self-determination, self-determination, self-determination. Therefore, here we are 62 years. Do we see any difference between the dark ages that was depicted in the Langi songs, that was depicted in the sayings? Yes, definitely there is. We have a government of self-rule. We have the functioning organs of our system, the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. We do have elections, democratic. It may have challenges as it is. Even the American elections have challenges. It is amazing that even in the highest democracy, a presidential candidate is shot in the public. At least we have here, we have not had Bobby Wine shot. So, not that I know of. During campaigns, I know what happened in Arua. But the point I'm trying to say, the point I'm trying to say here is that democracy all over the world will have challenges. But compared to the dark ages that we find in sayings and songs and all that, we are better off. Worth mentioning here is those twins who were conspiring to agree, how have they impacted on our independence now? Ideally, we should have economic independence. But one of the, Waswa or Kato, one of them, conspired to have economic system under what you call the Bretton Woods institutions. These are institutions of IMF and World Bank and their sister organizations. So these organizations, which is controlled by the Kato, who was very much supporting our independence with his arch enemy, Waswa, they now control the economy of the world. So how we drive our independence now depends on how we face these current challenges. It impacts on us. For example, when you talk of private schools or private hospitals, this is their birth child. They keep convincing Africans and dictating on us to say, states, remove your fingers from social management. States, remove your hands, and states, leave private-led economy. And when you talk of private-led economy, you're saying private hands should invest in education. Private hands should invest in health. Private hands should do this. Remember, this is one of the Kato and Waswa who had, at independence, supported motion, resolution for self-rule, for the colonized. And we thought Waswa and Kato were good. Now you see one. Again, you go ahead to see situations that we join now the civilized world. the so-called civilized world through international conventions. Because as you take your seat in General Assembly in New York as an independent country, you therefore have to subscribe first and foremost to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a world document. You come to economic and cultural rights, civil and political rights. And some of these you are actually signing agreement of a global way of doing things. And therefore, in a way, you are actually subjecting your independence to a global bid. Therefore, to me, if I had to go to the indicators of what we have achieved since, it's a long list. I may do it in another segment. But all to say is that from the dark time of no independence to the time of no independence and the achievement of power, the state power that Sarah said in Legal Notice number 1 of 1986, the state capture is a constitutional domain that when you take over state power, you give notice and you take effect. The state power, by giving it to National Resistance Council, it was the legislature at that time. It was further expanded through another law to expand the same NRC. It continued to make laws and giving guidance and authority to government until the new constitution, which reverted it to the nomenclature of parliament. So we have continued, we have grown. The different segments of indicators, whether it is infrastructure, health, education, I reserve for that. But suffice to say that we are independent. We just have to come head on with the global forces that try to capture us, with the global forces of that we have signed ourselves through conventions, and particularly the global forces that subjugate us economically. Remember that by the time of independence, a Land Rover could cost 10 bags of coffee. The same Land Rover is now costing 100 bags of coffee, meaning that the global inequalities has continued to widen, that the cost of the Land Rover keeps going up and the cost of the coffee keeps going down. Over and above, we are independent. We just have to stand up on our feet to face the challenges of the global inequalities to gain our independence.
Thank you, Major. We're going to take a break, but before we do that, I'll just pose a question to you, which I'd like you to respond to when we return. You talk about the songs that were depicting the very dark and difficult times during colonial days, but I'm also curious to know if the singers of these songs were to come to present-day Uganda, and let's say we took them a little back to November 2020, do you think they would sing different songs? Would their songs depict the closeness of heaven and how hell is a lot farther? Do you think those would be the songs when we know the bloodshed that we saw at that time, when we know the lives that we were lost, the dreams that were cut short by bullets under this regime? Do you think the songs would be different?
I will gladly answer.
Thank you very much. Let's take a break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break, and we're glad that you're still with us here on the Citizens Chat Show on Civic Space TV, streaming to you on YouTube. We're still taking stock of Uganda's 62 years of independence, and before we took the break, Major had just made his submissions, and I had posed a question to him. I don't know if you could pick it up from there, about the dark days of colonialism and the songs that were sung, and I was trying to I was asking you to just reflect and see if the times were now, would the song still be different with all the records that we have in terms of human rights violations and so on?
You see, a song is a subconscious thinking. It's like a dream. It comes unhindered. A dream is a subconscious thinking because you are half dead, you are half awake, you are sleeping. That is why children, say of 10 years old, who bedwet, who urinate on bed, don't intend to urinate. What they're dreaming about is connected to water. Either he's running to school in water, he's swimming, or his sister is pouring water on him, something to do with water. When he wakes up, he's on a wet mattress. So the same thing is with a song. A song is a subconscious reflection of realities around you. You don't even plan. And that it has not happened now on that subject is a clear sign that it isn't warranted. For example, about corruption, you may find in a subconscious way, for example, when somebody sings about Kiwani, he may not actually be thinking he's thinking about corruption, but he's singing about corruption. In other words, things are not the way it is supposed to be. Therefore, at this time, if there was a dark cloud as depicted by some politicians, it would have come up. True, there are claims of violations, but the conscious mind knows how much it is taken to address. People know there's police courts which have been trying police officers who have violated, who have been sentenced to prison, others dismissed. People know the general court martial which has been trying soldiers who have been violating rights, including at some earlier stage firing squad, others to long sentences like 50 years in jail. So people know that even in the killing that went round, that was talked about, government still extended and said if you have evidence of any soldier who did kill, he will still be prosecuted. So some of these mechanisms work to dissuade the subconscious mind from composing a song. So that song can come, and I warn my colleagues in NRM that if we don't do it right, it will come, because you can't force it. It is a subconscious thinking. It comes automatically. It may not even come, it may not come directly that we are singing about NRM has killed people. This is a song about, no, it will be tilted in a subconscious way that the singer thinks is meaning something. But if you get the roots, it means that, even when the singer may not be knowing. So it's song you can't control it. And that is why we have not had any, that I know up to now. And I warn my friends that should you do it, then you will see it. In fact, I at one time thought of a research department in our party, which research department, part of it was to check songs in the country. That would be a clear source of research by an NRM Directorate of Research. You go to Angola and see, what are they singing? Go to Test and say, what do they sing there? And go to Arua, what do they sing? it is a very good basis for a research department. You get a clear thing. But that they have not come,
There is
good.
nothing. Eh?
Not
So-
that I've
so
heard.
your
About
research-
the killings is referred, about the human rights violation.
Your research department does not even know Bunkenke. Tuli ku Bunkenke.
No, don't even go to Bunkenke. Bunkenke is very open. The man even who sang this song died long ago. Is called Basude. He sang Basi Dunia. Go and look at the meaning of that song.
And many others.
Basi Dunia is a very political song. You
So
just
these
go
are
and listen
reflections,
to that song.
and I have said that as part of our research should be. Of course, Bobby Wine is a politician.
Even
I
before
wouldn't.
he
His song
became
wouldn't
me, I
pass.
have brought
When did
Basi
His song
Dunia.
wouldn't pass.
When did he produce them? 10 years ago. Was he a politician?
I haven't heard that one.
You see.
Just
Your
you
research
go to your
department is
translators to
competent.
translate for you the song called Basi Dunia.
Incompetence.
Is it
in
that
your
Swahili?
research department.
No, it is a Luganda song. It's Kadongo Kam. The owner even died long ago.
Thank you. Joseph, you had a follow-up question for him.
Maybe before Joseph comes in. You see, we are discussing independence of Uganda. Independence should be a non-partisan issue. Independence, if we had a genuine national consciousness, it should be a moment of truth. A reflection on independence should be a moment of truth where we all sit here and say, here is tick, this is the square sheet, tick, 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 wrong, 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 repeat, retake. So we need to say, where have we delivered, worked better as a country? Where have we fallen before the pass mark? Where do we need to retake? And which areas should be discontinued? If I borrow that mark guide. But when we speak, and then you hear everybody speaking their own thing, the viewers there, especially those who are non-Ugandans, might wonder whether we are talking about the same country. Independence basically means self-rule. The question should be, how have we, and mine might not necessarily be a question to Awich, this is a reflection. How have we governed ourselves? Were we ready for independence? Do we know that freedom comes with responsibility as a nation? Because for me, a country where leaders have no respect for citizens, a country where leaders look at how as if, you know, these are my children, and then they are these children, or using our local language, habana nagana, webyana, you know, these are children, then these are the other people. These are my people, these are the others. Do we have even a country to talk about? When you follow the speeches of President Museveni, he has even referred this country to descendants of the resistance. As if anybody outside NRA, NRM is not a citizen of this country. As if this regime, if you don't support them, I think if it were up to them, maybe you would even cease to exist. And that is the mentality they bring in elections when they kidnap these children that support Bobi Wine. When they look, and I know, especially people from Western Uganda, when you speak about the regime, they look at you angry. There's somebody who has come to grab their bread from the table. So people have taken power personal. People have taken governance personal with vendetta, and the anger, they react. And unfortunately, out of the goodwill, because Uganda was coming from a cycle of conflicts, unfortunately, people gave NRM too much goodwill, to the extent that that goodwill led to monopolization of guns. When they came, they thought they were democratizing the gun. That was a lie. They took the goodwill because people were tired of anything to do with guns, to monopolize the guns, and now they are using guns to keep themselves in power against the will of Ugandans. They have also monopolized the economy, formally and informally. So when the president in his speech says that 67% of Ugandans are now in the money economy, and they have only to look for 33%. When PDM was being launched, they said 38% of Ugandans were outside the money economy. So PDM has managed to integrate only 5%. Is that the scorecard they are putting to PDM, the product they marketed as a bulletproof, you know, kind of miracle to economic disparities? Today, our economic disparities stand at 0.44 coefficient Gini. We are almost a divided country. If it gets to 0.50, we shall have 50% of Ugandans richer with economic opportunities, and 50% of Ugandans poorer, living in deprivation. Is that the country that people assumed at independence? When you look at the control of our GDP, 10% control 35.8% of GDP. The rich, 10% control 35.8% of the national income. 10% poorest control 2.4% of economy. And 20% poorest control 5.4% of the economy. So you have 20% controlling 5%. And then 10% richest controlling almost 40% of the national income. How shall we reconcile this country? And this trend is not about to stop. Because let's look at the IGG report of losing 25 billion
Every day.
Where is this money going? It's concentrated in the hands of a few officers in government. And when you compare that with the report by Equal Opportunities Commission, the Equal Opportunities Commission, which showed the lion's share going to Western Uganda of government jobs, it will show you that this lion's share of government jobs are the ones not only controlling the opportunities in government, but also in charge of the corruption. Because what is corruption? The IGG report is about corruption of public resources. It's not about private sector resources. So you have these people making 25 billion every day in dubious deals, shortchanging the taxpayer. I think we need to sit and reflect and say, these 62 years of independence have been years of self-sabotage, of self-damage, and say, hey, let's build the nation.
It's time to press the reset button.
Yes,
Joseph,
just to
can I come to you?
to possibly put something else where I slightly disagree with Sarah. In fact, we all agreed that at least, even if it were merely the first 5 years of our independence, that there was something purposeful about it. For me, I would argue that the first 8. And in any case, I would actually argue that Bireete, when Museveni was building foundation for his breaking of our independence in the bush 4 years. So I genuinely believe that at least 10 years in total, Uganda had consciously been seeking not only to secure its independence, but basically to try and build for the country. But I also want to agree with Sarah fundamentally that this debate about independence should really not be a partisan debate. And I know we've been in other fora where we've had this very same conversation. I think it's very important that citizens see it as that. It's extraordinary that, unfortunately, NRA has seen this thing as now a bit of it, just like the Citizen Republic of Uganda, as almost a property of groups of privileged individuals, in some cases possibly property of one family. When I look at what happened the other day in Busia, and when Museveni was inspecting that military guard of honor, is that what they call it, the military thing? The parade thing. And he went into that mini motorcade of his. I don't know how much it is, but it's a mini motorcade that looks like the Pope. I was saying, and this guy is going around and just be the opposite side of these soldiers and prisoners officers is a grass-thatched thing that he feels very strongly about, allegedly claiming, and said, this is one world versus a completely different world, including that guy who comes, I've come to see you guys in Busia, but I'll shield myself in a dubious motorcade. It's almost basically a thief, just been taken from a prison hall in Luzira to be taken to Bukedi. But do you know why? It's because, as I said earlier, Bukedi now is the poorest sub-region, that including the Equal Opportunities Commission report that Sarah talks about. Bukedi gets the list of the heads of department in corporate governance. Now, my point is, it's not about Bukedi. It's about Karamoja. It's about Busoga. It's about Kigezi. But it's also even about Ankole, where sometimes we have many of this conversation. I continuously also still go, and you go to a petrol station where the Askaris are Northern, actually, Lango, and Teso, Etal, and West Nile. But also once in a while you go in there and you meet also this young average Munyankolepo who can actually hardly struggle to speak to you in English.
Of course, struggling.
No, but I'm giving context.
Yeah.
You know, because nationally this is not known. You know, and when you go to the depth of that little boy, that boy's future has been killed. The foundation, in terms of the statistics we're giving at independence, was that in 10 years, by 1972, we're supposed to have universal primary education. I was giving you the index of what I was emphasizing in high school and universal education, all of which were free. Now, primary education, subsidized. But you know, when we're going for universal primary and secondary, the position was, including part of the Native Ubo Declaration, was that education would be free and compulsory. Community which free and compulsory, linking to what Sarah and Dr. Ojambo were saying, meaning that these young guys would have to go to school and that they would have to progress post-primary and systematically, and meaning when you reach the age of 16, which basically what's happened in the developed nation states, you go to either tertiary institutions or you then go ahead and quote disappear on the basis of your abilities. Now that is the independence we are talking about. Now that is not partisan. What it tells me, Joe, hospitals don't know tribes. Schools don't know political parties or religion. It is about the holistic independence of our nation state. And that's why, as I listened to this lady speaking, as Museveni was doing his rounds, it was very interesting that she was actually trying to fudge our history. That she said the strugglers for independence. She actually mentions Ignatius Musazi quite rightly. But in such a crooked way, it jumps from Musazi and says the independence founders got it wrong and Mr. Museveni discovered it. And so that's why when they took over, sort of things have changed, because part of course time I don't want to go into it because I want to come back.
Changes to the worse. It may be changing to the worse.
And you could see that this is somebody in Bukedi, I mean in which is basically in Busia, talking on Independence Day. And it's not only partisan, but she's actually telling direct lies in terms of the foundation of history. Now, Comrade Which Machale said that something that worried me, that they're helpless, you know. The Kato and Waswa, they picked our independence. They gave us our independence. They supported our independence, but they took it again. Meaning the Bretton Woods institutions, you know, are in charge of our economies, together with the Sudeans, and there's nothing we can do. I reject that. That was not our independence. Get the tone of Milton, what I was trying to tell you guys in 1965. We said, no, our destiny is ours, and no obstacle will stop us from achieving that. Now, granted, part of the obstacle was 1971, we were overthrown. But I think if there is men and women enough here, meaning young guys taking this independence beyond 62, you should be able to say, for whatever it takes, we will protect our nation state. Whatever it takes, we shall craft our destiny. If part of our destiny means taking a position against America, not on Twitter, or not through Twitter, not through abuse, but saying that, look, America, you are a nation state of civilization, but we are also people of great civilization, including by Chwezi, whoever they are, you know? And so if then that is the case, do what
did they invent?
Do what Obote did in 1963 through friends of Kennedy, and Comrade Which was in part right, that America was supporting our independence, African independence, because they wanted to get the market away from European owners of the African continent. And indeed, the Russian side was purely ideological. But the thing was, we get our independence and we become a sovereign nation state. The Bretton Woods institution came in the 80s. It was not in the 60s. We rejected, the UPC government in the early 80s, rejected the IMF and World Bank thing, as I said before, I've told on this program. We said, no, we've got this program here. You'll support us where we are. These are our priorities in education. These are our priorities in health. These are our priorities in agriculture. These are priorities as far as the environment is concerned. You may help us in this, but we're going to go. So that's the vision thing. So if you don't have that vision and you're not thinking African, please pack your bags and go down and look after cattle. You know, after all, we might even decide to leave Kisozi for you because we know Kisozi is a public property, but we can decide to leave it for you to retire. Leave it for Ugandans and then let out Kisozi. Leave it so that the fantastic camera persons who are behind this screen and predominantly young people, this channel is for young people, men and women by young people, so that they take the future of this country in their hands. That is what our founding parents did for them.
Thank you. Let me hear from you, Robert.
You know, the arguments being laid here do not want even very serious technical thinking. They are obvious things that anybody who has a sense of mind would see them. Number one, just look at the celebration of the Independence Day these days. It really shows you what it is all about. Doesn't make any sense to anybody in Uganda to tell him about a celebration of independence. Yesterday, if you did a survey of 100 people picked randomly in any part of the country, and you asked them why they have not gone to work, many of them would not know. Those days when we were kids, on Independence Day, it was a known thing. It would be announced at the school, and they would say, tomorrow we shall meet here at school and we shall all move to the nearest Gombolola. And the kids would stay there the whole day singing and praising, listening to songs by the bands and the other institutions.
And praising somebody.
In each village in Uganda, talking about Uganda and remembering and so on and so forth. These days, Independence Day is a begging ceremony where the chief giver of Ugandan's wealth goes and stands there, and groups are struggling. You saw how women were struggling to go and speak to the president in Busia. And the SFC was chasing them. And he enjoys saying, wacha, 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 wacha. And they come. That is the siyasa, the real siyasa that they were trained. He now looks as a very sympathetic person who is trying to help people, and this SFC is not caring. And each one comes and is mentioning their problem. Then he says, yeah, that one we shall solve. Some are even stage managed. Some are even stage managed to come and explain which money they got and how they have developed and so on. And these days with this PDM thing is another propaganda, siyasa thing. So that is one problem. The other issue, just look at schools. The other day I was listening to a Nigerian man. He was giving the 10 best schools in Uganda according to their ratings in Nigeria there. And I wanted to see this man, does he have sense? And he gave 10 best schools. And out of the 10 best schools, 8 were missionary. Only 2 were private. St. Mary's College Chitende and Namugongo Matters. The rest were missionary schools. Without order, he mentioned Budo, and I agree. He mentioned Namagunga, and I agree. Navisunsa, and I agree. The other one on Entebbe Road, St. Mary's College, Kisubi, and I agree. And so on and so forth. Because that's where even our people are struggling to take their children. I did not hear any school constructed by the government of Uganda after 1970. Not even one. And I asked myself, what went wrong? And if anyone here knows any government school, which was constructed after 1986, and where you would really want to take your child, you can disprove this Nigerian man. So that shows you that there is a problem. Where do we have a serious hospital, which was constructed by government, where you can take your child there? Somebody is going to talk about Mulago, women, is something. That's expansion. We want a hospital.
Lubo.
We want a hospital either in Tororo or in which place where if you have a serious problem, you will whisper to your colleague and say, take your patient to that hospital. Look at the road network that people have been talking about. I want you to talk about any road that has been opened from a forest. That a road, there was a forest there, then they opened a road there. And it is 100 kilometers moving from this place. All the roads that we talk about constructing is paving or tammacking in the language that we understand, roads that already existed in Marabu. Look at the railway. When these colonialists left, people would connect Uganda from all corners on railway line. Go to Tororo, go to Kasese, go to Gulu, go to wherever these places. There were railway lines connecting this country. In 1961, they were there. Of course, others were extended later after independence. But if you look at the railway network up to 1980 and the railway network today, which one would you choose? Where do you want to live? In the other one or this one? I hear the other day they were celebrating that the railway, their new railway now has reached Chetume. And the people were celebrating. Katumbo Amala was there, and there was fanfare that the railway line has moved from this Narukolongo to Chetume in Mukono. That now you can travel from that place. In 2024,
yet at independence we had a functional
railway was crossing the whole country.
Even NRA found it crossing.
I want you to, let's proceed. Let's just use simplistic understanding of life. Simplistic. We don't want to complicate things. Look at how many people at 1960 were employed by government in the factory. In the factory. Producing, working as engineers, as a production officer, in the factory. Not these ones who are working on poko and doing nothing. There are these days very many. You find people, I work with government. What do you do? I tells you I am there. My role. You don't understand what he does. So
influence.
Just look at how many industries which were owned by government were employing people in Uganda. And you compare with today, how many industries do we have owned by government of Uganda producing and employing people? In other words, if you asked any person in government, maybe Kasaija or anybody, that how many jobs do you create in government every year? That when you set out a budget, you create these jobs. They will tell you, we have enabled the private sector. But the private sector you are talking about, is depending on government finances to run. For example, I want to tell you that today, if you closed the treasury for 2 months, all the companies you hear here, which supply and do what, this private, so what, would collapse because they all depend on government. So government is hiding in companies, and these companies belong to friends and relatives. Friends and relatives. Because there is no method in Uganda.
No in-laws.
How about in-laws?
Relatives and in-laws.
The friend, relatives and in-laws.
That is the announcement
Yeah.
on the radio.
Because we don't know any method through which, if I want to be an investor in Uganda, I can go and there is a list maybe at Crested Towers. You remember for us when we were students, that's where they used to publish scholarships.
And it was open.
At Crested Towers.
Yeah,
You would
an
do, if
open
you have
board, yes.
applied, you go to Crested Towers and you check your name there and you tell your friend, my name is there.
Or if scholarships come, they're spread on the notice board. You can check.
Of local governments.
Yes.
Now, where do you see those?
No, include foreign scholarships.
Where do you see those? These days you have to be connected to somebody in this ministry. Then you just hear, I'm going to
Somebody
China.
who
Like
knows
some of
somebody.
us who are at the university, we write reference letters for these people. And I'm not going to say who. You ask, how did you get this scholarship? He tells you, my uncle. So when they give you the CV, you see who the uncle is. Of course, we are public
You write.
trustees. We write and they go, you have helped Uganda. So you don't need to argue. You just don't need to argue. Let's look at how things are being done in the country. Those are things that support a common man's life on every day. Transport, school, health. Look at the markets. The markets these days in Uganda, just the markets where women sell. They construct a market, very flamboyant market with a lot of money. Then the market 3 months is empty. People are selling again on the roadside. What is wrong with these good markets that have been constructed by government?
They can't afford.
The market have been constructed on private-public partnership on one side, or the markets have been constructed on loans, and therefore they want back the money. The rent is too high, therefore the markets are not for Ugandans. The last thing that I would want you to notice, to know that independence is still very problematic. Just go at Entebbe airport and make sure that there is nowhere you are going. You have just gone to observe
See the airport.
how many people leave Uganda and where are they going.
It's criminal.
Young girls and ladies, majority of them, by the way, it is a ratio of 10 to 90 now. You find 10% are men, 90% are female. What are they going to do? They are going to do what we would call leja. In our local language here, we call leja. There are no people who are leaving this country to go out there and do professional work as a doctor, as maybe an engineer. Those ones are there, but very, very minimal, 0.something%. Majority of them, when you look at their documents, they are going to work in people's houses, they are going to work in shops, they are going to work on construction farms. So leja. So, which we now call modern slavery. Modern slavery. And when you listen to them, you need to sit there when they are coming back. And they are stranded at Entebbe. They have called somebody from Hoima to come and pick them, and even the person is not coming. Then, once in a while, I give them a lift. And you listen to them. They tell you, I've been sending my money. I don't have anything. I don't know whether even the money I've been sending is there. And you just see a slave. If you studied slavery in history, you see another modern slave. Is that the independence we struggled for? Finally, control of government and the public office. You have just heard Sarah has told you this was Equal Opportunity Commission, a government entity which did a study. Any government would be worried that, for example, these days when you go to our ministries and government departments, just listen to the language being spoken by the receptionist and the people are down the floor there. You would know the boss on top, if it is a director or whoever of that place. Now, I normally hear people talking about Kenya, that Kenya is very ethnic. Where is it that is not ethnic? Only that Kenyans, for them, they are bold people. They say, for us as Kikuyu, we want this. In Uganda, when you talk about ethnicity, you have committed an offense. But ethnicity is the order of the day. I can tell you. Sarah, go and carry out a survey. Most of the taxi drivers are Basoga and the chapati makers. You go to Nira. Just go to Nira and take a survey. And I bet if somebody finds that what I'm giving is not correct, people come from one region. In fact, they speak their vernacular. So if you go there and your name is Ojambo, they look at you, they say, I will not speak the language because people will guess. But they say, but these people, why do they disturb us?
They have
Meaning Ojambo, that why is Ojambo disturbing us? Now you ask, who you? I thought we are all Ugandans. You go and look at the name of DPCs in this country. Just Google and get a name of DPCs. The other day I felt very bad. America sometimes should be careful. You give sanctions to people of the same village. 6 of them, go and check those police officers.
So why should it be careful?
They're mistreating the same one village.
No.
Because those police officers, 6 of them, I don't know under which miracle, had the same names. You go and check. 6 of them, they come from one region. I think they were even giving commands in their language. A country like that cannot sustain itself. We are just heading for a dangerous thing. For example, they give quotas of people joining police. What happens when it reaches up here at the DPC level, at the OC level, at the command level? What happens? What has happened? For us who are in schools, and they have saved us this by making sure that students don't write their names. They write their numbers. So when we are marking numbers. We don't know which number am I marking. The trouble comes when you go to now put the marks. Because there you have no bias. You are just recording the marks you have gotten. You ask yourself, people from this region do not study?
They perform better.
They are not there. They are not there. You are putting marks of 600, but some people of certain regions are not there. And therefore, these are problems that we are making people to fight for independence. Yeah. So you need a country where you have what they called in France career open to talent. And the career open to talent can not only force one group of people. Yeah, if you know now, like now, some of us are very happy to watch Uganda Crane. When you check Uganda Crane, and that's where talent is a very important thing, and you need to foster it. When you check from number 1 to number 11, there are only 11 players in the pitch, but they represent the whole country. You will find the goalkeeper is
Robert,
from
I'll request you to wind up.
Let me just finish this.
I just thought you were not timing him.
The goalkeeper is from Bari. When you check, some are from Uganda, others are from Busoga, others are from Western Uganda. So you see, even West Nile, you find even Muhammad is also there. So we need a country which looks like Uganda Crane.
Okay, thank you, Robert. So basically, when I hear what you're saying, it still fits in what Sarah was saying earlier about the inequality gaps that we are actually witnessing. So you're still talking about inequality in terms of access to opportunities, whether it's education, whether it's jobs, inequality in terms of access to resources, and so on. And what does this portend for our country going forward, especially when we are going to have the emergence of 2 classes, the haves and the complete have-nots? So where are we heading as a country, and how do we actually fix this situation? Let me give the mic to you, Major, for now, then we walk backwards this side.
Yes, thank you so much, moderator. I had actually thought you were not timing, because my colleagues talked as much as they wanted, for which I am very disappointed.
By the way, I timed myself. I spoke for 7 minutes only.
Anyway,
I
do it. But then the other thing is that you 3 are not being honest. Sarah and others said that when we are talking about independence, we shouldn't talk partisan politics. But each and every one of you are hammering what you think is failures of NRM.
Failures of Uganda.
No way.
You are just feeling
You see, the way I did it, how did I package? I packaged my initial intervention by painting the dark days of colonialism. I said how we won it. Then I came about how the global forces are. I never blame UPC, I never blame DP. But each and every one of you claims that we are not talking politics, but you keep hammering NRM. My presentation was completely non-partisan. Therefore, we should be honest.
Since if you say here, you can defend.
If you say we are not going to talk politics, then we shouldn't. But if not, then there's dishonesty. Now, first of all, there was something talked about the school dropout. Somebody alleged that by independence, from primary to university, the dropout was not as compared in NRM. This is absolutely not true. No. I take the example of Otuke. Otuke has a district. From independence up to around 1971, the Aliru Mara and the Omara Tubu were the first graduates. So, and yet, recently an uncle came up and said, everybody was sent to school. An uncle who's an engineer came up and challenged people. He said, you people, you're saying some of us are educated. Let anybody here who did not go to a primary school stand up. It was found that everybody had gone to school, but for one reason or another dropped out. In fact, as a matter of fact, in those days, if your father had cows, you had no reason for going to school. So if you are saying there was no dropout, how come the entire Tuka with the big sub-counties like Aduari, Urum, Ulilim, or Ukwang, their little Maras and Omara too were the first graduate. Where were those primary children? This is absolutely not true. Graduates came up recently. So if you are saying by then, from independence, primary school enrollment was this, then they all came up, then they went to university, where are they? The graduates in the entire districts are known, and they're recently. Dropouts could be there, but it is unimaginable that you'd even have 2 million people registering at primary and you have 2 million graduates. It is not possible. Others die, death. Others cannot comprehend to a next level, and that is why there's tertiary institutions for people to divert, because not everybody should be a doctor or a lawyer. Some reason. So to give an alarming figure of dropout and even go ahead to lie with the independence, which could not, until recently we saw graduates of the Little Mara and Omara too, that is wrong. Therefore, the NRM will continue with the mass line. Mass line meaning we prefer the majority to the minority. For example, we talk of vaccination, we vaccinate. In your village now, there is no polio. Go and tell me a child of 10 years with polio. Zero. Zero.
We thank one
Zero.
else.
They are there, but
So
they are
we
few.
take the mass line as if one else came yesterday.
They are there, but
Two,
few. Otherwise, they would not be selling
UPE,
these
we are going to
bicycles.
go for UPE. That is our mass line. We continue with all the diversions and the failures that is. 3, we are continuing with USE, Universal Secondary, and which is compulsory. We continue with challenges there too. We are very alive to the fact that you can't start a project or a program without challenges, including challenges of corruption in build. We are alive to that, and we shall continue. Now, of course, for example, you're saying you're not being partitioned. If you talk of somebody's future is killed, you are definitely inclining directly saying the future was killed by who. And this is the non-partition that you are talking about, and you continue talking about. Of course, you divert and talk about the person of the president, for example, whatever happens at a function, and we are saying we are not going to be partition. So we are not going to be partition. I listen. You also not. I also listen to you.
Mr. Othieno,
I also listen to you. Now, the health provision. Well, next time, if you give your manifesto and they vote for you, choose to do it differently. But for us, the social contract that we give to the people and the people buy and vote is that the districts that had hospitals, we chose to upgrade it in status. We started health, we have units, 3, 4 district referral. So you may not see a newly constructed hospital, but our strategy is, if Lira was there, instead of constructing a new Lira, upgrade Lira, change it to a level that we have checklists to prove, and then build other, which are very many. I wish you had told me I came with the data.
Shrines.
So the health are there. The hospitals that you want build, I don't know which one. Health centers 1, 2, 3 at sub-county, at whatever level is there. The Lira one or the Mbarara one, we have just given it another name by giving another infrastructural development. So these health facilities are there. Roads, I thought the last thing that you'd complain about independence on roads is the last thing about roads. Well, if you think it is sinful because there was a path from Iganga meandering through to Mbale in the name of Tirinyi And that one is built big, wide, and tarmac. And you say it is so bad because there was a path here. Me, Ojambo, what I wanted was, don't follow this path, build a new one. Really? That Tirinye was not? Really? That from Fort Fortal through Kamwenge to Ibanda was not? Really? That the road from Palisa crossing to Kumi was not? Really? That from Soroti to Moroto was not? Really? That all the borders of Kenya, you have roads going in? Really? That the river Nile, that had a bridge in Jinja, a bridge in Karoma, a bridge in Pakwach, now has a bridge in Jinja, a bridge in Kayunga, a bridge in Para. All those are nothing. We have crossed River Nile. Road should be the last blame that one should talk after independence. We have done it no border to any country in, crossing us as no road linking. Sudan, many. Congo, many. Tanzania, many. But somebody will say, no, I want to see a road which was constructed in the bush. So if the Fort Fortal road through Kamwenge to Ibanda had a path and is not a big tarmac, you are still thinking that it is so sinful because why did they build this? They should have built it in a forest so that me, Ojambo, I'm happy. Really?
But Major, I think...
Liatonde, what you call Kagota Road, Liatonde
so
to Ibanda.
Let's talk about infrastructure generally. If, say, we could be doing well in terms of roads, we see a lot of construction works going on across the country.
And roads well built.
Let's talk about, let's say, a cheaper form of transportation that would be the train infrastructure that they also talked about, which was functional at the time of independence. And now we are seeing Kenya making a lot of progress with the standard gauge railway, very nice trains that are actually working and cost effective. Tanzania doing the same, and we are still in talks. We are still at the point of just having a conversation.
Uganda had the ships running on Lake Victoria from Uganda to Kenya, from Uganda to Tanzania. What happened to them?
I was going to talk about railway. It is good you hurried for it, but I will mention. Now, there is also the talk about factory workers, government factory workers. Government factory workers, I had talked about the Britainhood. But if you're talking of a worker who is paid salary, whether he's paid in a government factory or is paid in a private factory, the rate or the number of job creation is available at any data. Because there is much more factories now than it was. The factories that were the thing in Ginger, this cotton thing in Ginger, then whatever, they were countable. There are less than 20 of them.
Ginger alone had this event.
So now, you are talking of, your dream is to not only have a factory worker, but your dream is to have a factory worker in a government factory. Trends have changed. The economic system globally has changed. And that is why we are saying, as Africa, and not as Uganda, the independents are being judged on how much you implement the Bretton Woods institutions. Private investment is the trend to go. How much we do it is the thing. So, are you worried about a job given in a government factory or a job in a factory? If it is a job in a factory, the number has increased much, much more. Data are available. If anything, even the population of the entire country was small, leave alone the few factories which are there. So this should be a point very clear. Now on the issue of foreign labor, I don't think I should really talk about it because I've said this and this. Colleagues, foreign labor is not a Ugandan phenomenon. Kenya sends more foreign workers than Uganda to the same factory, the same industry of house girls. The point here is that the world now has divided labor system. Some part of the world are old. Like in Germany, you find an average village people are 60 years and above. So there's labor discrepancy. To this extent, the world through United Nations has come with a convention on a law called Migrant Workers Convention. The whole of United Nations cannot pass a convention because Uganda is sending workers. It's because the world has known that there's imbalance in labor, and therefore a UN convention should come to protect, just like a UN convention on women. So do you think a United Nations convention came to protect rights of migrant workers? It was because Uganda is sending. So it is your choice. You either choose to go to where labor is in balance or not. But to say it is only in Uganda, when Tanzania and Kenya sends more than Uganda. By the way, for your information, Uganda even sends plus Rwanda, because Rwandese come under the cover of Uganda.
Even Kenya, even Ugandans go under the cover of Kenya.
So the migrant working thing is a global thing. Philippines, for them, they lack, they have nurses. They have 11 million.
How come Philippines? If it's good you have brought Philippines. The Philippines, how come they are the highest
let me say
in professional
it,
labor?
Let me say it is not you saying.
Why?
I'm saying it.
Okay,
Filipino has 11.
we have
Now you are
minutes.
timing me. You were not timing them.
No. It's
Now
a
you are timing me.
that
You are
has
not
come
timing
for
them.
all
You
of
see
us.
how unbiased you
I
are.
was
All of
timing.
us.
Now
All of
you
us.
used 10
No,
minutes.
just finalize what
Anyhow,
you're saying. And then
what I am saying is, I can stop there, but I want to go back from my initial discussion of the dark independence, how we got it, with the current global challenges. I dissuade myself from partition. But if you pull me into saying there is lack of it because of NRM, then there brings it. And yet you are the one telling me, let's not go partition. And you shut my mouth not to be partition, and you open yours to criticize my party. That is unfair.
Joseph.
I just want to say
that energy. If
I
we are
wish,
working like this.
I wish NRA were non-partisan. And I wish they took independence as something, a struggle by all Ugandans and for all Ugandans. And that our independence and sovereignty is about the citizens of this country and their future. And I wish, therefore, like the celebrations that they're enjoying themselves, not with Ugandans, in Busia the other day, at the backyard of my Tororo. In fact, in my opinion, an insult to the people of Busia. In any case, anyway, Busia has the biggest son of who gave Museveni his first job. Talk about jobs. Wilson Okwenje was head of research in President Obote's office in 1970 and gave Mr. Museveni a job without knowing who Museveni was, who Museveni's father was. Wilson Okwenje now is in exile. That, if it's not an indictment, then I don't know what is. And in that Busia place, the whole conversation was so partisan that I wonder how many leaders of opposition were in that forum. How many leaders of political parties were in that forum? In the context and conversation, how many appreciations were being noted? So, guys, we are talking independence. My grandfather fought for it, just like Awich's. My grandfather's leg was broken. My party fought for it and led this country independence and led to a massive economic emancipation. We need to do that. Fast forward today at 62, we are contextualizing the conversation that happened at 62. So let me say this. Tirinyi Road was actually the first project, would be Chinese project in this country. Contract for had already been made by the UPC government before DP and the NRA guys broke our government in 1985. So it was not a path anyway, but it was a road, it was a Maram road. So while this thing was done under NRA, it was a contract that had already been settled by UPC, and these guys, of course, have failed to do anything on it. The railways, we must talk about them, yes. The railways have been killed literally. So it's not anything partisan. We are discussing politics. All our camera people today, fantastic young people, in any case, many of them have never boarded the train. Perhaps they don't know what Uganda Railways looks like. So Katumba Wamala will go ahead and tell them there's some miracle happening somewhere here in
It has reached
but at independence, this is a track record of government.
I first boarded a train 20 years ago at Dubai airport. Where else would
I'm sorry, darling. So it is that bad. But anyway, so at independence in 1962, we found the train in Soroti. In 4.5 years, took it to Lira, took it to Gulu, took it to Pakwach, including building Pakwach Bridge. Pakwach Bridge is now sinking. That is rail network. So young guys don't know. Talk about that. This business about bridges, I've talked about it. But look, schools. Comrade Awich is saying something that's important. I'll be very brief. About enrollment. We cannot talk. We're talking about schools generally, minus the enrollment thing about the people who fall out of schools. But you yourself have said you're going to go for universal secondary education, which is compulsory. When you talk about a drop-off rate of primary living, at primary living exams, so how is universal secondary education going to be compulsory when the majority of the PLE guys would have dropped up? But anyway, the point being made about education at the time was not that everybody went to school, and I don't think that's what Dr. Ojambo said.
No.
We are simply saying people went to school. And in fact, the graduation figures that Robert was talking about in 1965. Do you know, Comrade Awich, grade 2 teachers, up to the time that NRA came to power, they dropped it. Grade 2 teachers are people who went to teach after primary 7. So
And
after
they were
primary
qualified.
7, yeah, and they're qualified. And they're excellent teachers, Grade 3 teachers were people who went to teach after senior 4. My brother went to teach after senior 4. And do you know what was that? In the early 80s, he went to teach in Kenyan secondary schools. And he was amongst the best biology teachers in Eldoret, teaching secondary schools.
He was a qualified teacher.
Qualified teachers, So that is the quality of education thing that we're trying to talk about. So meaning that after primary living, you would go to tertiary, you go to technical school, you go to teacher training, you could go to nursing, you could go to tertiary education, and all those were there. So that's what was absorbed. University education, as a matter of interest, then would be the fewer people who went through that. So you're absolutely right. Some villages would not have had the first degree. I was the first person in my family, as a matter of interest, as a matter of fact, to go to Makerere, the Makerere that I was aiming to, and I'm the last born. But all my siblings are fine, and they're generally quite educated. So that is the context of this thing about schools. Now, this business about hospitals, I don't know the point we're trying to make about every hospital in a district. I told you, I have an experience, a traumatic experience. I had visitors 2 days ago. My cousin could not go to hospital because they couldn't afford it. And they not talk about transport to Tororo. They talk about money to go and pay that. And that is a terrible thing. On Independence Day, I felt personal. I took it very, very personally. Number 3, I am campaigning for a monitor to be given a hospital. I'm campaigning with everybody else down there. But I'm campaigning as a part of a community. This district, at Molata, the center of the Republic of Uganda, is a district with the health facility, so-called health center 4. You pass down there and you see how these poor Langi people are struggling. And you know what? Down at the river, NRA is eating their fish. Eating their fish. Struggling poor people in a Malta. That's a reality today. You guys can go there for weekend and see the reality. So a district without a hospital with the health center 4, which cannot cater for basic services for our people. So that's what we're talking about. And then finally, the shocking thing about this PPP, I find it worrying, Judith, that Africans are continuing with this public-private partnership thing. This is an import, and that's why I say that the guys who brought military dictatorship in this country are terrible, because UPC and others used to think, and I'm asking future leaders, including NRA, to think, so that as Africans, we liberate ourselves after 62 years of independence. We should stop buying froth programs from elsewhere. This was a Blairite program. You know what? PPP is so extremely unpopular in Britain today, you can't talk about it. Blair brought it. Actually, they built some schools about it, expanded schools and refurbished some hospitals. But it was found that private sector guys who bring in money were ripping off the public. And so it's such a thing that you cannot talk about in Britain. So, Sarah, if future UPC government post this, I hope we're able to have a government of national unity that brings us together, because we need to national reconciliation. But a future UPC government in which I am head, PPP would not be down there. You cannot subject our health to profit. You cannot subject our education to profit. You can't subject our agriculture to profit. Not that there are no private sectors, and meaning government plays an enabling role for the citizens to go and run. So this PPP thing, every time I hear it, and sometimes I meet these public civil servants, and they boast about it goes in PPP, and they want to make it look so exotic, so powerful. No, it's terrible froth.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you. Let's hear from you, Sarah, and then
I think for me, as a lot has been said, I just want to point out a few challenges. 2 related to the president's address, and on the issue of roads. So the president announced that now we are going to construct roads to Central Africa Republic.
yes.
We don't even border it.
That's through Sudan, South Sudan, DRC to Central Africa. But we cannot construct roads in Kampala. Kampala is a big slum. We have a capital state that is so ashamed and embarrassing. Instead of saying, you know, let me first clean home, we are making, and I kept, sometimes I wonder, and you know, and I know age is wisdom, but also age.
Not in Africa.
No, let me come. Age is wisdom, age is golden. I don't despise elderly people. But I know that sometimes a certain age, you know, removes you from reality. And you go in your own world. You know, sometimes you sit and say, is the president still with us in Uganda? Or his mind has gone somewhere else?
His grandchildren.
Like, how the hell can you tell Ugandans at independence when we are jumping muddy, potholed roads in the capital state, in Greater Kampala, Kisumu, Mukono, and our vehicles are damaged, and people have, those who walk on foot have nowhere to walk, but the borders are a menace. We have no drainage, manholes are open, and you announce at independence that you are going to construct roads in the... Is he still with us?
And that is in Bukedi, where we're talking Nagongara Road.
Is he? So for me, I was like, okay, is this man still here with us? Or mentally he has shifted to some other world that we don't understand. The second issue, he always, whenever he gets to these functions, he shouts about corruption. So yesterday he announced that it's now the evening. The evening when your country is losing 25 billion. Yeah. He has always been saying that. You are not finished. The other day he asked MPs, do you want to see Brad? Yes. Now you are going to see Brad.
State of the nation.
So now it is evening. Every day, man, there must be responsibility in leadership. Can he take accountability for the mess of corruption? So when you look at that speech, we are comfortable drawing Bachwezi. Bachwezi disappeared how many years ago?
I don't know.
They were a myth. They disappeared. They don't exist. But for NRM, you would rather invite Bachwezi to a dining table than deal with issues that affect citizens. Are you ruling that mysterious world of Bachwezi that Ugandans are on their own and just eating money and wasting taxpayers' money? At times, I don't know what we are dealing with. So when it comes to corruption, the economy, and the cost of public administration, the latest State of the Economy report by Bank of Uganda shows that we've depleted our reserves and we are only remaining with 3.5 billion. And that's the lowest in 10 years. We've hit the lowest. Over COVID, we depleted by half. Now we have depleted to the extent that now Bank of Uganda, maybe they are also looking for accountability because previously they used to hide these figures. But now they are bringing them out because at the end of the day, Ugandans will hold people accountable. It doesn't matter how long it will take. We are now remaining with $3.5 billion in terms of foreign reserves. Basically, they were announcing that we are bankrupt. And the reasons they gave, high costs of public administration, high costs of debt interest and debt repayment. Every day, this government is borrowing money. Borrowing money where 25 billion is lost. If we stopped corruption, we wouldn't need to borrow money.
And patronage administration. Yes.
We made a fictitious budget of 72 trillion, where every quarter you are supposed to release 18.5 trillion. But everybody knew this government had no money to release. Every quarter you can't go beyond 5 trillion. And now the government has cut down their shame. Now in the budget framework paper, they have zeroed on 57.1 trillion. So why the hell were you budgeting? Budgeting air. So we have a government that lives in Bachwezi, budgets air, wants to construct roads in South African Republic, and we are here talking of independence. Man, we are in trouble.
Judith, just a statement. You know, there is a theory which I normally tell my students called the baboon theory. The baboon theory is a simple theory where they collected animals and they said that wild animals are making ourselves be ashamed, and therefore we are going to kill the ugliest animal. And the baboon jumped. Not me. At least it is a warthog. The warthog, you can talk about the warthog. I've just seen that here. Because for me, I didn't mention any government. I was just talking about Uganda in general. And the baboon jumped from nowhere and said, not me. But leaving the baboon theory alone, factually, of the independence time, NRM has consumed 38 years of it as we stand now.
More than half.
And only 24 was for the other governments. Therefore, if there is somebody, if they are caning somebody for the failure of Uganda, who will receive more canes? That one again I also leave to the viewers to judge. Who will receive more canes? If they are caning presidents, they are put Obote there, Amin here, and the other, until Museveni. Who is to blame? Who has messed us for the longest time here? We don't know. Because if you know, Singapore did not need 20 years to change from where it was to a first-class country. It was a few years and they were there. Lastly, I think all of us have a responsibility without pointing fingers. We have a responsibility to point out areas where we have had weaknesses and to propose how we can solve those problems. We have to fix our education. We have to fix our health sector. I've just been talking on the phone a few minutes when I left here briefly. Somebody is in Mulago. They just want to do a scan to confirm a test after removing something in his stomach. They want 400,000.
Seriously?
A government hospital.
In Mulago
So why don't they
hospital,
go to a clinic?
They want 400,000 shillings, and this person is now stuck there. And somebody is saying, oh, the hospitals have been organized. My friend, people are facing these problems. We are not just here to get these problems.
Okay.
You go to Mulago Referral Hospital, Cancer Institute.
It's time
people
up.
have spent there 2 weeks. They have not seen a doctor. 2 weeks, they sleep in tents in Kampala here. Just go there, drive there and go and see.
Robert, thank you very much. I think we actually have to wind up the conversation. I'll just say thank you very much to all of you for your views. We've been talking, of course, about reflecting on the country at 62 years. Where have we come from? Where are we? Where are we heading? Thank you very much to you all. This is still the Citizens Chat Show on Civic Space. We'll be streaming at 2 p.m. every Friday. Join us next Friday, same time, for another conversation, and hopefully same faces and different perspectives then. My name is Judith Atim. Have yourselves a wonderful day.
Thank you.